In a moment, I'm going to be talking to Shane, who is the self-declared, as we know now, spokesman for the no bullshit generation. We're going to be talking about whether we do all face a media bloodbath, whether we have all got it wrong with millennials, and I think a little bit about Scottish hospitality. Now, Shane, welcome.
Thank you.
I don't think many McTaggart speakers advertise they're going to be out drinking till 3 o'clock in the morning. You did. How was the Vice party and how are you feeling?
It was fun, and I actually feel pretty good. I feel pretty good.
Now, when we look at that tape, and it's extraordinary what Vice has achieved, I don't think anyone would question that. One of the things that struck me looking at it is a bit you guys can't see. Actually, at the clock at the beginning, it has producer Shane Smith on your own show here. And I think one of the things that threw people a little bit last night is when we saw the clips of Vice at its very best, they featured Shane Smith. And I think what we all thought was the whole point was you had loads of young people to do that kind of stuff now, didn't you? Or...
Well, I did also say that I'm a megalomaniac. The average age at Vice is 25, across the board globally. I believe, and people ask me all the time, they say, why does the CEO make content? And I say, well, look, if you do a car company, you should really love cars. If you're going to make shoes, you should really love shoes. I love content. I started this magazine doing content, and because of that, you know, I know what it's like to shoot. I know what it's like to produce. I know what it's like to cut. We're a creative-first company. I have to know what I'm doing. Now, we do 7,000 posts a day. I probably do 7 a year. So I do less than 1% of what we do. That said, I like to understand making the content, and some of the things, for example, the President Obama things, they ask for me specifically, and if I like it or I enjoy it, then I'll do it. But the majority of what we do is done by 25-year-olds, for sure.
So it was an extraordinary McTaggart performance, I think, by anybody's reckoning. I've certainly sat through a few, I've slept through a few. I don't think anyone will have slept through last night, not least the poor Autocue lady who I've just seen, who I think had a hell of a time of it. But I think what's really amazing when I look at that is trying to understand the correlation between you as a person and Vice as a brand. I mean, how much of that, you know, iconoclastic, reformed or not reformed alcoholic is really part of the Vice brand? How much of that is real?
Well, I think in the beginning, you know, when we were smaller, you know, every company takes on a sort of whiff of its CEO. And initially, when I was doing a lot more of the content, the North Koreas, the cannibal warlords, all that stuff, there was more of it. There was more, I used to say I was the Stalin of Vice. But now it's gotten to the point where we have had our own sort of give it over to the interns now once or twice, or in some cases 3 times. And so I think it's developed its own entity, its own persona that's sort of drifting away from just being a reflection of me.
Let's talk, there were loads of big themes raised last night. I think the most striking, certainly for a British audience, is this suggestion that we had shortchanged millennials, that there was a real appetite for serious journalism, for international facing current affairs, that we had, I suppose, not delivered on for a young audience. And I think what's exciting and interesting from my point of view is to what extent is that really a critique of the British market, where there's a long and noble tradition of that sort of work, or were you making a more general point?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're a global company, you know, we're in 58 countries, and there's great companies out there, and I said at the end, you know, the BBC has been doing a great job for a long time. Obviously, Channel 4 is famous for documentaries. We've worked with people that worked with Channel 4. I believe Kevin Sutcliffe used to work there, who's doing a tremendous job for us. But, you know, what I said is be honest, and I put myself in that too. I said, look, I asked myself the question, are we making enough of this content? And the answer for me was no. And I think the answer for a lot of people out there is no. And that's backed up because if you look at, and we do a lot of research, so we look at the passion points for young people, which I brought up yesterday. Number 1, music, and then environmental issues, economic issues, social justice, LGBTQ issues. So, and when we do our research, we say, okay, here are the main passion points, and here are the numbers. How much of global programming do you think is devoted to environmental issues?
10%.
Sub 2%. How much do you think against LGBT issues?
Are you now interviewing me, just so I'm what's happening here?
It's sub 1%. So Channel 4 can be good, BBC can be good, Vice can be good, And what I said, and it's the same thing when I said about brands and people and voters, and it's everyone. If we're going to get to 80% reduction of emissions, which is the global consensus of what we need to do to survive as a species, then everybody has to get involved.
Okay, well, let's
if 1% of the people are doing it, you can say, well, Channel 4 does it, or BBC said BBC does it. Great, bravo, fantastic. But are we doing it? So I'm not speaking to you then, I'm speaking to everybody else who isn't. Because if you're doing it, but it's still only 1% of programming, then not enough people are doing it.
So we don't make vapid and vacuous shit after all?
I'm sure you do.
I mean,
But you probably make good
made.
stuff too. I mean, everybody has to do a mix. I mean, we still make vapid and vacuous shit here and there, but we try to have, let's say, a 50-50 rather than a 90-10 or a 99-1.
Okay, so I don't want to get into the economics of how your TV channel works, because I thought your analysis of the media show interview was spot on. But let's try and get our two worlds to collide for a moment to understand like for like. So part of your analysis, which I think is interesting, is that young people have an appetite for this content. They're not being served it by conventional media. There is an opportunity that has arisen that Vice have jumped on. Understand that. You've now moved into my world, for want of a better way of putting it, with Viceland. We've just seen the figures, the Nielsen figures for the A&E show. 49,000, I think, roughly, young people watching that show, half what it was doing when it was the History Channel. Very pure demographic, that's all great. But the fundamental thesis that on large platforms, you still can't get young audiences to watch this content in volume seems to stand, doesn't it?
Well, again, what I said in my speech last night was, if you look at the economics of television, the economics of television allows you to drive a very dense, high quality, high amount, high volume of content. And if that content resonates with young people, which is what you're asking, the answer is yes, you can then take that content and you can do a lot of things with it. You can license it to mobile, you can license it to online, you can sell it, you can put it on your own platforms, you can do things with brands, you can sell the advertising against it, you can monetize it 5 different ways, and then you take it globally. And then, so for example, you come to the UK or France or India, and you're making content there, then that content can go, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what's interesting, and I was talking about roadblocks, and this is a perfect question to highlight that, is when you do something different and you launch something different and you say, here we go, we're going to have this content creation engine that's going to fuel all these different things. And we did 58 networks. We actually have 50 mobile deals that mirror those networks. Then everybody says, well, your ratings, your day part in Baltimore, that's even worse than our thing. Or, well, the thing here that you're doing, we're better than you at that. And so you're going back into, if you want to talk about devolution, you're going back into, let's compete for New York and LA, and we're saying, well, we're trying to do a global thing here that's never been done.
I understand that, and actually I completely understand the point you're making economically. If you can syndicate, if you can get it to scale, you can monetize it, and you are at the forefront of thinking of how organizations do that. The question's quite a pure question, because the insight is interesting. Do you think you have found a way of finding international current affairs, difficult subject matters, whether it's climate change or women's rights, and getting them to a large audience on a TV show?
Yes.
Because, give me an example of how you've done that, because the only data we've got suggests that you face I'll give you an example. On Monday night, Channel 4 had a 20 share of young audiences. It didn't have massive volume all night. Why? Because we have a very pure young audience that doesn't translate into large numbers. Now, your suggestion is, you've learned something about young people that the rest of us have failed to clock. You can get it to scale on TV. That's what I'm not asking about the money, I'm asking about that.
Yeah, on all platforms. But again, if we say TV, so for example, what you're pulling out, which is pulled out by either CNN or Wall Street Journal, which is a one-day part, it's 16 million people a week extra that we're doing 4 months in. So that's 16 million. And with a bullet, A, just in America. B, again, those 58 channels that we've launched, that we've done deals to launch, every one of those, it grows. For example, in Canada, we're doing about 4 million, and now in Mexico, we do about 8 million, and Snapchat, we're doing about 9 million. So when you start to cum all these numbers, you say, okay, again, going back to the content creation engine, if you look at those as global numbers, we're going to be looking at somewhere around 600 million households. Now that's big. That's incredibly big. It's a lot of people. Like right now we're at 380 million people and we're already the largest new media brand. So if you double that number, I believe that's a success on TV.
Yeah, I understand that. It's a slightly different answer. I mean, the other thing that struck me last night, and it was a really interesting claim that you made, is that you saw this step change in your business when you went into serious content. You moved away from the old style, sort of hipster content, and you were dealing with serious issues, and that's when you saw the uplift. And I followed Vice from the very beginning. I'm a huge admirer of what you've done. So I thought, well, I want to go and have a quick look and see what you've got on tonight. So I think we've got a screen grab of what was on Vice earlier. Now, you know,
that's pretty important stuff, though.
Now, to be fair, I found that helpful, very, very helpful.
Yeah.
I've got a lot out of that piece. Useful, pertinent for me. A few other things. I've got to the man who had sex with 365 men in 365 days. Top stories, sex shops, swingers clubs. I don't have a problem with that, and this has been served up at me many times in these jobs. So that's not my point, really. I thought what you were saying is this clickbait was not what you did now. What you did now was serious journalism or a way of capturing the world for young audiences, and that's what's really driven the growth at Vice. So it's not a criticism, it's a perfectly legitimate way of getting people in. But where's the mixed economy in that?
It's a very even-keeled question. If you look at Vice.com out of the UK, it has, and we have many verticals. What I was talking about last night was we're the fastest growing news platform in the world. It used to be in Vice.com, news, we had tech, we had food, we had all that in there. Now we've verticalized them out. So Vice News, if you want to go to Vice News right now and see what we have in Vice News, it'll have all that stuff. Yeah. If you want to go to Motherboard, it'll have all tech issues. If you want to go to food, it'll have all the food stuff. So what you're doing is a little bit of not beer, as they say.
Not intentionally, as I say, it's not criticism. I think that's a perfectly legitimate thing for you to be doing.
The other thing that we're talking about with the growth of it is we can go and we can see what we're programming on Viceland right now, on our TV channel right now. So what you've done is gone to a Vice UK thing and say, let's find a salacious thing that we have on Vice.com rather than go to Vice News or go to Viceland. So.
Okay, good point, well made. I think one of the other interesting things about the way you talk about a brand, and I've read lots of your interviews, is you talk about, I think the direct quote is to be the biggest fucking media company in the world. And that's fascinating because it's often about scale, the way you talk about the Vice rollout. It's not about quality or about being the best or the most creative, it's about scale. And how important is scale to you then?
Well, obviously it's important. Look, you can't scale unless you have quality content. That's a given. And if you look at the reel that just played, I mean, it's just all of the awards that we win. I mean, we've won more Webbies, best in the world, best in the web, than any other company in the world. So of course it's important to do quality content, and we're very conscious of that. But, you know, if you're not going to scale, I mean, for the longest time, you know, we were the hipster's Bible. Cool by definition is small. And we've been cool for a long time. And we believe that we have good content, important content, entertaining content. And we believe our content's just as good, if not better, than most people out there. So why wouldn't, I mean, if you look at MTV, I mean, okay, should I not go after them and take their market share? That, you know, it's a poorly run company, it's got terrible content, it's losing its audience. I'm going to go get them. Anyone from MTV here? Just want to come back on that?
And one of the other things you talk about is being part of sort of cultural fabric, and I find that a really interesting way of describing it. It's a very commercial organisation. Do you think if you get to the sort of scale that you aspire to get to, that with that comes a different sort of responsibility about the way you talk to young people?
Well, I think that's how we're going to get there. I think, look, it's very simple, and I said it last night. When Gen Y was niche, we were niche. And then as Gen Y became the sort of hegemonic power globally, we grew up with them. And we're going to grow old with them. And at some point, we'll be the MTV, and people will be coming after us with holograms in your brain. So, you know, but it'll be a great 20 years. There's a changing of the guard every generation in media, and we're the changing of the guard for Gen Y.
And do you have a sense of what that who the people will be that will come along and will eat your lunch?
Well, I've got 20 years, so no. They're probably in grade school right now.
Okay. Now, the other big theme you raised last night is this idea of a sort of media bloodbath, this apocalyptic vision of everybody eating everybody else. And what was interesting about that was
it's not apocalyptic. I said it's good.
Yeah, good, but nonetheless consolidation in all sorts of ways that might be more focused on the consolidation than in the end game, that there was a lack of sense of how we were going to evolve these funding models. Now, I sit as an executive on a broadcast network, and we're thinking all the time about our O&O platform, syndication, how do we monetize it? So do you think that Vice has got a particular insight into that is different from everybody else?
Well, we have, so you're conflating two issues, but I have insight, which is how I set up the piece on. I've worked with the top people in the big five, let's say. And what's interesting to see now is that you've had consolidation in media for the past 10 years, but it stopped when they got to be these super entities. And it was thought that they were too big to sort of merge or buy each other or what have you. And the fact that right now, all of them are trying to buy everybody else, and for the first time ever, shows you that there's something happening in media. And if you look at new media and all of the froth that's happening in new media, and on top of that, the old media guys trying to stave off things by buying the new media guys, it's fantastically interesting. Now again, I don't have a crystal ball, but are these mergers going to happen? Yes. Is that going to change the media landscape? Yes.
But what you talked a lot about, interestingly, is that there was too much focus on that activity and not enough focus on your 3-screen, 1-screen, the rollout of content.
100%.
Exactly, but that's fascinating in the sense that you're saying, I can understand where the problem is. This is going on around consolidation. What I couldn't get my head around is, what are you then saying? That everyone should sit around and hold hands and find a way in which we can monetize rolling content out on platforms? Who's going to blink first in all of this? Because as you pointed out last night, there are huge vested interests, aren't there?
Well, we should all hold hands.
Okay, we'll get straight onto that.
That would be nice. But what will happen is that there will be some people that merge, and there's good tech companies and mobile and online companies that will merge successfully with larger media companies, or something like Apple will buy Time Warner or Netflix, and that will sort of again change things up. And I think that would be a great thing. You know, it's not just in media, other things would be exciting. I mean, Apple's also rumored to want to buy Tesla and have Elon run Apple, and then your car and your phone and your home are all, I mean, that sounds to me amazing and exciting and fantastic. So I think that there's going to be some successes for sure. And some people will get 3 screens, 1 screen OTT with innovative monetization, right? Because they have to, and some people won't.
Now, one of the bad guys you painted last night, and I think a lot of people will understand this positioning, was around Facebook and Google, and you talked, this was apocalyptic, about how the change of
I don't know that they're bad guys, they just own the largest share of traffic.
But your point, which I think, again, point well made, is that they can change an algorithm and overnight the economics of entire media organisations shift. Now, what you didn't come onto, and I'd be interested, I'm sure people in the audience would be interested to hear, is, well, how do you tackle that? You know, they're at such scale now. Are you always going to be buffeted by those sorts of changes, or is there a way in which you could lead the agenda on that?
Well, I think you have to, and this is what I was getting at as well, is, you know, you have to, look, it's the same thing that happened with YouTube, for example. YouTube is amazing. It's an amazing video platform, probably the best one in the world for online. The problem with that is if you put all of your content on YouTube, then YouTube basically own your company. It's the same thing with Facebook. I mean, they're amazing at mobile video, but they effectively own your company if you just say, well, I'm just going to do all my traffic on Facebook. So if you want to protect your business and grow your business, you have to say, okay, we've got to go off platform, which, as you know, is much more difficult because you have to go do deals with the mobile carriers. You have to go do deals with TV. You have to go do deals with other providers. You have to do deals in China.
So what's the solution?
Well, that's the solution, is you have to get off platform. And then what's interesting about that, much like your TV metrics, which everybody likes to trot out, if you actually go off platform, then it hurts your O&O. Although it shouldn't matter. If you can monetize on any platform, what does it all matter?
But I suppose my point is, you know, I've sat around exec meetings at Channel 4 wrestling with exactly these issues. So it's not as though your take on it is particularly different from what every other media organisation is wrestling with. I suppose that where does it shake down?
Where does what shake down?
Well, is it just a series of piecemeal deals that people find as a way of making value from content, however it's indicated?
Well, I think, look, there's some companies that will go out there and they'll have the wherewithal to make off-platform deals, or, you know, come up with a Snapchat strategy, or come up with a Weibo strategy or Yuko or Todo strategy or whatever it is. That's difficult to do. And there will be companies that don't. And the companies that don't will get hurt when algorithms get changed, which is what's happening today.
Now, one of the other things you raised last night, and I think it makes complete economic sense, but I suspect it was like a blow to a lot of producers in the world, is this is all about owning your IP. So you've got a room full of producers. Are there opportunities for British producers in terms of relationship with Vice or not?
Definitely. I mean, look, we're very hungry for content. We're hungry for talent. One of the reasons why I'm here is because of the programs for apprenticeships for young people in media. And, one of the things that we've done well in America that we want to sort of mimic in our other countries is we have deals with the deans of the tech colleges, so the top students get jobs, and they like it because their students get jobs, and we like it because we get great talent. And then we have an in-house school, sort of a master class run by Spike Jonze, our creative director, who goes through, and by the way, when you're a young kid straight out of school, and you get to sit with Spike Jonze for 2 weeks and learn how to tell stories and learn how to edit. So I think that for myself and my company, especially for young talent, we're very hungry for that. But also for producers, that have a point of view, that want to go out there, that want to tell stories, that are passionate about things. We're definitely, Channel 4, BBC, Vice. There's a lot of places out there, and I think we're one of the best for a global audience, for sure.
But you're right in saying that the real value sits in the IP, and I suppose beyond individuals coming and working for Vice, are there opportunities for independent producers to make stuff for you, or is the transaction going to be you give us all your rights and then you can work with Vice, or how does that work for you?
Well, I mean, we do both. Hitherto, it's been a lot of in-house because we saw, especially in America, where the networks just became banks. So they would sit there and say, okay, people just come pitch. It's the same people pitching, the same shows, the same networks. Everyone's really hot about 5, so there's 5 bidding wars, and then the rest are sort of programmers versus the tentpoles, and they just finance them, and it's external marketing in many cases, it's external PR, it's external production. You don't own the IP. I mean, famously, they got House of Cards just for America. They wanted it globally, and that's why a lot of seasons only last 5 seasons, because then all the contracts go up, and So we said, well, we don't want to do that. Also, Netflix did a very smart thing in that their hits drive their enterprise value. So if NBC has a hit, it doesn't affect their share price. Whereas if Netflix has a hit, their share price goes up. So we want to own our IP. We also license it all over the place to all different platforms, so we have to own it. In fact, we realized that we had to own the platforms as well, because if you go to a traditional deal, if you don't have your own network and you just sell a block or a show, I mean, all of this actually started because we do research and we looked at food, which is so the largest cohort that spends money on food and booze, going out, not on like Tesco's or whatever, but going out on food and booze, is Gen Y. And we couldn't find zero Gen Y food programming. So we did, Fuck That's Delicious and Wong's World and all these millennial food shows.
Seth Rogen making sausages, I see.
Sure.
Lunches, yeah.
And so, you know my content better than I do. And so we went to MIP, and it was like, at the end of trading places when they corner the frozen orange juice market, it was just we couldn't write, orders fast enough, but we said, well, we're going to just lose this now. We're going to lose the IP, we're going to lose the ownership, we're going to lose the ability to sponsor it, we're going to lose the ability to put it on mobile. So that's when we started saying, well, what if we own the platform? Which is why we're doing partnerships, making our own networks, is because then you can actually own the IP, and at least you have some leeway to experiment in mobile. At least you have some leeway to do day and date with online, because if you just sell it, you don't have any leeway.
No, I understand that. I think it will probably feel like quite a closed conversation to a lot of producers who'll think that's a hard act to get in on. But I know we all really want to get on to finding out how you're going to run the BBC. So let me just take a few questions from the floor. Is there anyone, particularly on the production side, that wants to ask about that? Can hardly see anyone here. No, deafening silence. Right, let's take some of the ones from the apps. This might be wasted on you, but it made me laugh. Are you a new media Alan Yentob? Do you know who Alan Yentob is?
No.
He is a global phenomenon. I mean, you sort of are. You sort of are. So take that as a compliment.
Right.
Another one which I know is going to wind you up because I've seen you answer this before, but it is around that branded content area, and you know this remains incredibly contentious. You know,
Sure.
we have a long and noble tradition here in public service broadcasting of Chinese walls between, you know, content that's funded by advertisers and between bespoke content that is funded in a different way. How much leverage is there? Because you have still been quite opaque about some of this.
Well, I don't know how opaque we've been. I mean, for me, there's obviously a question when it comes to news, right? And so luckily, we've had a great relationship with HBO where they fund us so we don't have to take advertising. So that's great.
But simply put, and this the big question everyone wants to know, is there a situation, have there been situations when you have bowed to a client's interest over the journalism? It's that entertainment journalism dynamic.
Not on news, but I think that if
But you have elsewhere?
Well, I think if you look at other things, like for example, food, and if you say, well, I mean, the way we look at it is we say, okay, let's go back to pre-spots and dots. You know, you're going to make only the Shadow Knows. It's going to be sponsored by Calgon. It could be sponsored by Chesterfields, but it's going to be sponsored. You're going to make that show, and the sponsor comes in. If you're going to do a show, let's say, about going out, and it's sponsored by Absolute, right? What we recommend to the brand is don't put Absolute in there. You know, don't have people doing shows. Don't do product placement because people will sniff it out. It doesn't work. And, you know, we learned that with Intel, you know, whereas we didn't do bong, bong, bong. We didn't do any of that stuff. We just said at the end, there's a production partner. And to go back to, if you have product placement, if you have these overt ads, they can't get into a lot of countries anyways. So if you just have them as a production partner, they say, oh, Spike Jonze did a film for me. I like Spike Jonze. I get it. Intel brought me that. And because of that, which Intel was like, this can't work, they went from, you know, whatever it was, 3% positive in Gen Y to 58 positive because they get it. They're very smart. So I think, you know, have there been one or two cases? Probably. But in the majority of what we preach is just, you shouldn't do that because they'll sniff it out. It has nothing to do with me, and it's the audience.
Let's talk about you running the BBC then. You were really open. That was a job advert. So it's your first 100 days running the BBC. What are you going to do?
Reopen Channel 3 on TV.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
No, I'm just joking.
Do you think BBC Three should have gone online? You understand that well better than almost anyone else. Was that the right call, the wrong call?
Well, I think we'll see. You know, if you look at the numbers say it's bad because their competitors got a 20% lift and they got a 20% hit, and that 20% didn't come back. So I think that if you look at it that way, it was not good. And I think if you look at the numbers, you know, as millennials get more purchasing power, they buy screens. Now the screen for them is a different screen in that can be a computer screen, that can be for Netflix, it can be for, you know, Apple TV, it can be for all different kinds of things. But they are buying screens. Before it was like, well, I've got my phone and that's all I need. So I don't know that I would have closed it down because I believe that there's going to be an uptick.
I think in its defense, it's not technically closed, is it? I think they probably object to the use of that phrase,
Right.
but yeah, I know
or
what you mean.
shifted it to whatever. I think I would have, you know, waited a little bit. But I know that the mandate, you know, changed. Like, we've got to get more millennials and we've got to, you know, get online and we've got to do this stuff. But if you had an asset that's that good, that's beautiful, you know, what I would have done is I would have partnered with Vice.
Well, that is a surprising conclusion to hear you say that. Curious in some ways, isn't it, the BBC Three model? Because they've moved from TV online, you're online, and have been very open about the fact that for as long as 75% of advertising sits on TV, you're going, you know, quick pace in the opposite direction. Now, we talked earlier about your figures, but what other value is there in you, in a sense, coming back and flirting with old media?
Well, I don't know if it's old media. I think it's all media. Again, what I was trying to get across last night is, it was sort of my coming out of the mud moment of saying, because we were an online company. That's what we do, online. And we never thought about TV. And when we started thinking about it, it was sort of like, why are we, it was sort of like, we're so prejudiced against TV. I don't understand why. And it's true, if you look at mobile companies, like app companies, they're just mobile. They don't even care about desktop. And online companies who came out of online are sort of, this is what we do. And TV obviously is just TV. And so we believe you have to be completely platform agnostic. Now, it's not just 75% of the world's money, it's a huge amount of the global audience is still TV. And so if you have a TV...
Did you just say that out loud?
Yeah.
I'm happy with that.
Okay, good.
I mean, that is good news for us, actually. So you think it's not quite as bad as you might have suggested last night, that TV might be all right after all, Shane?
Oh, I never said TV was bad. I never said once TV was bad. I'm doing TV. What I said is, it's great to be on all platforms. And by the way, when it's holograms, we'll do holograms.
But is TV
I don't
in
know
this
why we're so
context for you?
afraid of saying let's do all platforms all the time.
Is one of the reasons you've been reluctant about the figures, and I understand this, because actually you're using TV as a shop window, and that is going to be the core of how you monetize this content strategy. You're exposing it to more people, you can then drive consumption on other platforms, and then a platform agnostic strategy really makes sense. So is that the role it plays? It's a shop window?
No, it's a content engine, because you know this. I mean, in America, you have sub fees. I don't know for how much longer, but you have sub fees. Those sub fees and those advertising rates pay for what you know are high production value content. Now, what's interesting, the reason why AT&T, probably all the talk about hot mergers, the AT&T buying of Direct is probably the most interesting, because what's happening is, and you know, I was talking about the media agencies going up for review, the mobile companies all know that there's now no brand loyalty. There's total churn, and it's just all about price. And the only way that they can drive brand loyalty is through exclusives, A, and then B, all of their money is coming through data usage. And obviously data usage, the most data usage is video.
Scripted, yeah.
So now what's happening is they're looking to buy whole networks just so that they can drive video. The problem is you can't necessarily buy, let's say, Time Warner, because they're averaging at a 62 or 63. Well, so 63-year-old people don't watch video on their TV, on their phone. So they want to get the 13, 16, 18, you know, that demo. So if you can actually come up with all that content, the way you're really going to make your money on TV, ironically, is through mobile. So our mobile push, and mobile is the future, is coming through TV. Now, the added bonus of that is we get an audience that we maybe didn't get before. So for example, in Brazil, where TV is still huge, we get a whole new audience coming in, and then we get direct to consumer, and then brands come in, and we get a whole new relationship, and a whole new thing happens every time we do TV.
Now, what's the end game for you? I mean, there are lots of questions here, all in a similar sort of vein about selling out, about Murdoch, about A&E, about Disney, that this isn't what your brand was about, and I suspect quite a lot of young people thinking this isn't what I signed up for when I believed in Vice. Speculation already that you'll sell a majority share. I mean, is that the end point? Can you see that on the horizon when you're even richer?
That was a great question.
I'm pretty happy with it, I've got to be honest. Yeah.
Sort of a fait accompli that there's a lot of people that work for Vice who now say that, oh, well, this isn't the company I signed up for.
No, not internally. I mean, I've got them here. People saying, how could you do that? You know, you sold to Murdoch, as you say, the Lily Allen misconception about, you know, what your actual majority stake is. But an awful lot of, if you're different, you're different. You don't then do a deal with the devil sort of thing.
Well, it's mostly in the UK. And what happened there was, ironically, was we did a deal to do something with Star in India and Sky here that we would fund out of that deal. And what I said to Lily Allen, which I found funny, and it's only sort of out of the UK, but that, you know, everybody's like, oh, Rupert Murdoch owns Vice. And I made a joke that, well, if Disney owns Vice, it's better in the UK anyway than Rupert owning Vice. Now, obviously, he has 3% of the company, and I don't know when that became owning anything, but
what's the time frame for you selling?
But
because you
everybody
don't talk
asks
about...
this, but I got to look. What I've said, and I've said many times, and I'll say it again today, is when you run a company, you have certain decisions you have to make. Now, I have one of three. One is go IPO. Now, I would go IPO, although I don't necessarily want to run a public company, but I would do it so that my employees, my partners, can liquefy their assets, because we have billions and billions of dollars of stock that these young people own. Every employee at Vice is eligible for a SAR, which is a stock appreciation right, options, or RSUs. So that's a lot of money. And, you know, I've got to look at how do we actualize that money for our people, A.
In a sort of duty of care to your employees way.
Yeah.
Nice. What else might you do?
Or you're looking at a strategic, alignment, which, you look at, it's been very, like if you look at Instagram went to Facebook, and that was great. I mean, they went 10x, in a year. So it was fantastic for Instagram, fantastic for Facebook. Or you stay private and you just try to come up with a secondary market or dividend out the cash.
Now, what everyone wants to know, what's the time frame for that? What's the time frame?
There's no time frame.
Okay.
There's literally no time frame. This question has been there for the past 4 years, and we haven't done anything for the simple reason that if you look at the big offerings, there hasn't been a media offering like Vice in a long time. So the only things that we look at are things like, okay, what's a high-profile, offering that would be of the same level, that would raise about the same amount of money. And Twitter went public at $30, and now the stock's at $17. So that's sort of, if I'm doing it to get my kids money, and then all their options are underwater, then that was a stupid thing for me to do.
Yeah, I get that. Right, any other questions? I've got another good one here, actually. If Trump becomes president, what will it mean for Vice?
A lot of content.
Good point. He rates, definitely. Another one here. It said your content caters to millennials. Does that generation deserve their bratty hipster reputation?
Yes. I mean, look, who's calling them brats? There's definitely a generational divide, and I'm Gen X, so I sit in between baby boomers and Gen Y, and there's definitely a sense of this is ours now, we have to fix it, you guys effed up, so we're going to come at it, and that can be seen as bratty or entitled or anything else. And there's another thing of just like, okay, I've been watching this stuff for you guys for so long, I want to have my own stuff. So there's a bit of it, but it's also just coming through what filter.
Another one here. I can see how Vice's content would fit into a schedule post-Watershed, but is there a plan for earlier slots? Will that dilute the brand? You take that.
Post-Watershed?
Yeah, this is an old-fashioned concept we have here.
Right.
It's about the fact that some things, I'd say quite a lot of your content is a little bit too rude for people before 9 o'clock. So what they're really saying is there a version of your brand that would still have that edginess that could play to a younger audience?
Right. Yeah, I think, first of all, you have to see the Viceland content. And I mean, I think we've done a very good job at being honest and true to the brand, but also getting things out there that make a difference. And I'm really proud of the programming, which will only get stronger. It'll get stronger. There's so many creative people in the UK. And there's a lot of creative people in France and in India and in Germany and Brazil and all these different places where we're making things. And that's very exciting. And that we can bring that to all the different countries. So there'll be a lot of stuff. And one of the things we've noticed, and again, everyone likes to trot out premiere numbers, but we're one of the top DVR numbers because most of our viewers watch on demand, which goes back to the commercial problem. We have to come up with different ways of doing things, because if we're 80% on demand, then we have a different issue on monetization. It's great because that's how our demo consumes, and we just have to figure out solutions to that. And because as you will know, our +3 numbers and our +7 numbers are through the roof. So when Nielsen drops in the next few weeks, we can have this discussion again.
Now, Viceland's about to launch on Sky. I thought you were forensic in your dissection of the media show interview. So give people in this audience a sense of what successful will look like for you there. What are you looking for in terms of what that needs to do?
Well, I think we have a long-term view on that, and I think that again, when we launched TV in America, the reason why we did the block on Nielsen, which most people do in TV, is because H2 was I believe 58 or 59 was the average age, and it was quoted yesterday 40, but we're actually at 36 now. And that doesn't mean that the 58-year-old people just turn into 34-year-old people. It means that they leave, and then you have to sort of rebuild an audience from scratch of young people. And you don't do that in a week. You don't do that in 2 weeks. Now, the good news is that everyone attacked us in the first 2 weeks, so our numbers could only go up. That was silly on their part. But everyone was like, here's the day part in Baltimore, and here's the day part this. Now, actually, when you look at the numbers, and when you look at the, like I say, the +3, +7, the DVR, all the OTT stuff, the online stuff, that we combine them together, the numbers are actually fantastic. And so what you're going to see, I don't know if I'm still on the watershed. Oh, what does success look like? What does success look like? Success for me looks like creating great content in the UK that resonates with people, not just in the UK, but all over the world, and joins the sort of Viceland best ofs in all of our different countries. Now, we have a long game planned, and we're going to announce a mobile deal also in the UK, and then we're going to announce some pan-European mobile deals.
Can you give us a bit more information on that?
No.
Okay.
But,
fair enough.
and we're going to do a pan-European mobile deal, and these mobile deals, everyone will see then that they slot perfectly into the Sky deal, and Sky's a great partner, and we also are, you know, going to slot a big online thing into that too, and then there's some OTT plays. So it's not just going to be, you know, a straight TV play just in the UK. It's going to be a sort of bigger play.
I'm going to let you go and nurse your hangover in a minute. But before I go, I just want to ask you a question which is about the culture of Vice. And one of the things that's striking about your brand positioning is it's about honesty, transparency. I press the red button, I capture what's happening. I'm not analysing, I'm not trying to evaluate in a meaningless way. It's about how it seems. And yet so much of the brand association around Vice is people find you difficult to deal with. They find the press relationships difficult. You're not transparent with your numbers. You're reluctant to tell us how many people are watching. You don't want to talk about ratings. I mean, how do those two things coexist? Is that intentional, or can you imagine a world where, I mean, why couldn't you just as a company say, we've got nothing to hide, you know, we can tell you everything?
We don't have anything to hide. We'll tell you everything.
Well, why don't you then?
We do. Everyone can see everything we do. That's the great thing about metrics. You can see, in fact, all of our everything that we have. The only thing that we blockaded for 6 months, which everybody does, is to get, when the 58-year-old people leave and the 30-year-old people come in, to just have some time to sort of figure out some stuff.
That.
They do, actually.
No, they don't.
In America, they do.
No, they don't.
Okay. Oprah did it.
Okay,
the last
finally.
4 networks.
Tell
in
me
America.
what next for you, because sadly I fear we won't have you as Director General of the BBC. So if it's not that job, what other job were you advertising for last night, or were you putting yourself out there for last night? Are you going to retire on a beach?
I was joking.
You were joking, yeah?
Yeah.
I kind of know you were, but are you going to be a high-functioning alcoholic on a beach under a palm tree, or are you going to become a media mogul, or will you end up running one of these big companies that you are seeing caught up in this power fight?
I always think to myself that the end game is sort of the atoll, Amadeus wig, ponytail butt plug. The whole 9 yards, the full Monty.
I think it's fair to say that never in the Post-MacTaggart interview has the word butt plug been used before, and that has put us at a particular point. I think we can aspire to try and get something even more extraordinary next year. Will you join me in saying a massive thank you to Shane? Thank you.